All right, we're live. Yeah, we're live. We are live. Live in the direct. Okay, good night, good night, good night, good night, good night, everyone. Welcome to another evening of Fatherhood Talks. Tonight we will be having a very lively conversation. At some point, we are also having maybe a somber conversation as well. I cannot start our today's show off without really acknowledging our brothers and sisters, our grandmothers, our aunties, and the uncles who were senselessly massacred just going to the grocery store. And I highlight probably one brother who was a father who went to the grocery store to get his child birthday cake. And he, doing what fathers should do, showing the love to his child. It was just a tragedy that the child. And all I could think about. A lot of times we evaluate, and I think this is the important part of understanding and being fathers, is that a lot of times we look at what we don't do as fathers and how it affects us, but we forget how much our fatherness affects other people. And so that little boy had to realize that his daddy never came back with the cake. And that, and he won't see any more cakes or birthdays with his daddy. And that's what a real tragedy is, when we think about it in the fatherhood aspect, it's and that's also making us also think, and I'll say this out to guys, time is short. If you're not being able to be engaged or see your kids or get involved with them, do whatever you can, because you don't have forever to do so. So just throw that out there. All right. So tonight, our night's topic is big boys don't cry. If you've seen the vignette, the little comical, when I use these comics, I give giving the credit to the artist, so they don't come back and say, "Hey man, use my art," without you giving us our credit. But it speaks right to what we're going to be kind of talking about today. Let's hear who's in the room and who's on the panel tonight. Let's start with our elder states. I say elder father, father, grandfather, all around husband, brother Jordan.
Good evening, brothers. Good evening, everybody. Larry Jordan, father of two. I'm gonna nickname myself tonight Big Larry.
Big, all right, we got Big Larry in the house tonight. All right.
Go J. Rob Menard, father of two, one about to graduate high school, so I'm excited about that. Another week, I'm gonna have two kids that are out of school. Feeling is good, it's bittersweet, because now I don't know what to do with I was just thinking, like, you know what? After you graduate, you know how you just used to a routine, picking up, dropping off, and all this. I'm like, man, what am I gonna do at that time? I guess it's more time to myself. So as far as self-growth, so I guess I'll start doing that.
All right, starting your empty nest routine. That sounds beautiful. Okay.
Donald Jones, divorcing father of two. Daughter is 12, going on 13. Son is 11-year-old, be 12 in December.
All right. Frederick Adams, father of three, and a grandfather.
All right.
Hey, Lionel Lightborn, father of seven, or a tribe of seven. and my baby daughter will be graduating tomorrow. So she's the last of the seven, the magnificent seven.
We kind of love that. You know, this is the season, graduation season. All right. And the Doom, did you go? Johnny, and I think, hey, Ed, how you doing tonight? Glad to have you on tonight, brother.
How you doing?
All right. Oh yeah. Oh, and we doing introductions for the night.
Oh, my bad. My bad. I got you. It's my turn.
Yeah, it can be your turn. Yes.
All right. My name is Ed Tenney, and I am a father of six, 3 biologicals and 3 steps.
All right. You know, somebody give you run for your money in here, lineup like born. And Doom, I think Doom, did you go, Johnny? That, and we'll get started.
Yeah, I did go, Ron. I don't know if you heard me.
Okay, I got you. No, I mean, you know, still, all right. So I think that's everybody. Everybody went.
This is my Dr. Doom. I'm batting cleanup. Dr. Doom, aka Jason, father of have a big blended family. 5 of mine, 3 with my lovely wife and a grandchild. So that's 9 of us in the tribe now. Again, just grateful for the group.
Yeah, so you come on here saying, letting people know that you got the real tribe. Everybody else faking around. You living out there in Oklahoma on the compound.
Hey, almost at 12. So once I hit 12, I'll truly be there.
I hear you.
Oh, what you doing? Playing spades?
Last but not least, I see Brother Rohan. Brother Rohan, we just doing introductions for the night. It's good to see you. We haven't seen you in a while. I was concerned about you. You're on mute. You're on mute, Rohan.
Yes, good night, Father. So I was away for about a week. Glad to be back. You guys are introducing yourself?
Yes.
All right, super. I'm Rohan Rodok. I'm a father of 2 girls, one 14 and one 16. Just as usual, I'm more than happy to join the program to empower and learn as we go forward, being parents.
All right, fantastic. All right, so guys, let's just jump into it, man. Tonight we're talking about big boys don't cry, and that can come at us a lot of ways. I think one of the first things that I think about is I can't, his name slipping my mind right now, right at this moment, but I know his theory of the man box. Maybe somebody can help me with that. He talks a lot about the man box, and I remember his story exclusively. And I want to start it off with that story. As he said, you know, when his brother died, he was a teenager, brother died, and they lived in New York City. So they had to bury his brother in New Jersey. He was getting buried in New Jersey. So they went out of the city and went over into New Jersey to bury the brother. And they were in the limousine, in the stretch limo. And he said that he remembers his dad being so strong the whole time. His father was the rock of the house, of the family. And that at some point he realized that they had to stop at the rest stop. And I think about when I'm riding on the turnpike in New York, that I visualize this is the turnpike. I just make it up in my mind. This was the turnpike because of the famous turnpike. That everybody got out to use the bathroom. Only person that didn't get out the car was him and his father. And when he ended up getting out of when everybody got out of the car, his dad cried. And he told him, he said, well, he said he'd never seen his dad crying. It was almost a shock to him, because he thought his dad didn't have any emotions about any of it. And his dad told him that, I can't let any of them see it, but I can let you see it. But it's an important. And so we, this kind of gets us started in this kind of conversation that we're talking tonight. It's like, when is it that we learn that it's okay to show these kind of emotions? And I think I used that vignette, that little commercial. It said, it shows the mom barking at the kid, kind of saying, shut up if I give you something to cry about. Men and boys don't cry. And then later on, when he's an adult and he's speaking to his partner, the partner is saying, hey, you don't show any emotion. I don't understand why you don't have any emotion. Why are you so emotional? And that is something that comes maybe sometimes based on, and I think a lot of times for us as fathers to show our kids what male emotions look like as fathers. They get a good idea what female and women emotions look like, but not very often do they get to see us to show pure emotions that they even have some genetic traits connections to. So let me throw that out there. What do we think about that idea of our neediness as fathers and as men to show this type of emotion to our children? Now, and let me say this. I talk about our children, but also being able to show it to our partners that we're even going to be in relationships with. So hey, now let's throw the ball to the court. Let's see where we go.
Well, I was always taught that not crying was a sign of strength, and at least in our household, the only time that you were allowed to cry and still be strong was at a funeral. That was a time that you can express yourself emotionally. And any other times, I don't care if it's a happy time like a wedding or or at a banquet, if you'll be given an award. It was just a sign of weakness, especially culturally. And our culture, there's a big thing about no, boys don't cry, men don't cry. And I think it's more of a cultural thing. What do you guys think?
I'm on board with you regarding crying. I used to volunteer at my daughter's school, and I remember seeing young men. He used to sit by himself, and he had his fist chucked or his fist locked, and he was crying. He sat there. They placed him in detention, and his fist was made up tight, and he was crying. So even though he was in pain, even though he was in detention, and it might have had anger and emotion that he doesn't understand, he was crying. And even in our culture, we're taught not to cry, even when it hurts. I must say, in the Chinese culture, crying is seen as a beautiful thing. It is seen as a stream of letting go of your emotions, and just coming into your emotion and showing your emotion. So I'm on board with you where that is concerned. It's a cultural thing, and what you're nurtured or taught, unfortunately, some of us we'll just go with what we're taught.
I think I understand this. Since we're talking about it as a cultural thing, I can understand historically the psychology of why men don't cry. Being a man, and particularly being a black man, is because crying for us is almost like a last resort. Crying for us almost like leaves no room to be built, right? Crying to us is almost a sign of being broken. You understand? And it's almost like to cry says we have no more building to do after that. If you see a man cry, that might also be a sign. You're talking about being strength. It may also be a sign of quitting. You understand? I often struggle with myself. I said, you know what? sometimes my kids may have done something to disappoint me or bring me near tears, not to the point that it was nothing tragic, but some of the decisions they may have made could bring me close enough to tears where I felt like, to a certain extent, if I did cry and they did bring me to tears, you understand, that may have changed the whole dynamics of how I actually dealt with them. And not that I wouldn't have loved them, you understand, but I may have distanced myself from them to a certain extent where, not saying it can't be repaired, but it would take a lot on their end to repair. And so I understand the psychology of why men don't cry, because crying is a last resort. And remember I said, crying is like almost the equivalent of dying for a man. I've actually did a workshop in prison where the guys say the way they cried was they cried on the inside. So you may see a guy standing up in the prison yard and he may have his arm folded and he would look like he's in deep thought. He said most of the time that's us crying on the inside. And again, I understand the sociology of it, because there is a certain thing, dynamics that goes along with a man crying, and a certain vulnerability that goes along with it, not only just for that man, but how people may approach that man and may even want to take advantage of that man, children included.
I think I want to take that a step further, because I agree with what Lightborn is saying. I also think that when a man cries, it's almost as if, depending on the situation, others will look like, yeah, I broke him, right? And so to not cry will show, like everyone's saying, the strength that I have, or the strength that they have, in order to show the other person, you're not affecting me the way you think you're going to affect me. You're not going to change my demeanor. When, like Lightborn is saying, you'll cry on the inside, but on the outside, you're just going to see this facade of stoicness.
So let me throw out there the examples. I hear you guys speaking of those. I think about the example of Glory, and Denzel Washington is getting the lashes, and he stays so strong, and only you see as that one tear come down his eye. And that scene is so permanent, because it's a moment to say that he couldn't be broken. But you see his humanity in that he does feel the pain. And all the other soldiers identify, because most of the people had a problem with him as a soldier, identify his pain and his anger, and where he couldn't just, be vulnerable. And I think that's a big part of what we're talking about, is this idea of how to be vulnerable. And how do we teach our kids at this point that they can have this vulnerability without it meaning that they're weak, or not, that they can't be still the man, or still can't lead, or still can't be who they really are.
And I was thinking the exact same thing as far as that movie Glory with Denzel. And in that particular scene, yeah, his objective was to not be broken. That was his whole objective, even though he was caught stealing, and wanted the shoes. I think that was the reason why he was getting beat, because he stole something, got caught, and refused to be broken. I think in our culture, when it comes to crying, I think we have to walk a fine line as Black men, because I think there are legitimate reasons to not be broken in front of certain circumstances. I think it's extremely important that as we lead, we have a core value, if you will, that I will not be broken by this particular scenario. But in other situations where we should be allowed to have emotions, we carry it over too far. We go overboard. That in a certain situation, it's okay to be emotional and show brokenness under that particular circumstances versus another. And I think we we've gone overboard as black men. We don't know how to walk the fine line between showing strength versus showing vulnerability. We just take it too far.
You know, and you're so, and sometimes it's hard to even show us how to relate it. The only time I could ever relate to the idea of saying to someone that, and then it's really a bad example because we use sports as the time that we see the most, the gladiators cry, but you know, most of the time, the most of them were crying is when they lose. So it almost then builds back into this negative part where, you know, they don't cry too much when they win, you know, they're celebrating, they're showing the champagne, they running around, but when the people lose, they're really, really emotional, they start to cry, and it shows it almost as a weak. And so now I know for myself personally, I can get emotional and become, as you probably say, sensitive, because I'm probably in tune with the realms of my emotion, and cry about things that are beautiful. And that is in a joy, is in a happy place, is in a powerful place. And I think more of us have to begin to. You guys are going to these graduations, going to these, these celebrations. You may feel the emotion to cry, and that emotion is nothing. I think there's nothing wrong with it. I think it's very powerful to show this is one of the emotions of joy. And it doesn't have to always be about weakness and sorrow, you know. So I think that we can start changing that narrative as for us as black, because I think it is very strong. I think, you know, Rohan kind of talked about in the Asian culture that might be what they're doing that, but I think in our culture, you guys hit it on the head. It is a complete sign of weakness, and it's dangerous because it means that if we get to a point to cry, that we're about to do something that's completely maybe out of our character. So that's another aspect we have to sometimes think about.
Well, think about the pride and ego also, as Ron talks about crying. Our actor recently, if you look at, like, if I may say, Will Smith acted in a certain manner and he was crying. He responded to his feelings. He lashed out, and then he at some point you saw him having tears. What's your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on that is that he's an actor. To be honest with you, for me, you know, you guys might disagree, but they know how to cry on cue. I think what he did was he sat back, he saw something that he did wrong, and he was like, crap, I messed up. So when he's doing his speech, I don't think it was an overwhelming of emotion that he had. I think he's an actor. He cried because he felt that would get him the how you say that, the response. Yeah, the remorse and all that stuff is like, and so for me, I wouldn't use that as an example. But when you have like Ron was saying, an athlete wins the Super Bowl and is over, and you're like, crying sometimes comes because you have no other way to express all that emotion you have inside you, and it just comes out in crying, right? And I think that's one thing when we look at certain situations. That's when you reach a pinnacle of something that you've been really striving for. You cry. When you lose something, you cry. You know, all the times that you're going to cry is just an overwhelming of emotion. I mean, as a man, that for me, that's what I think of when I think about, when a man cries. It's an overwhelming amount of emotion that there's no other thing to do but cry. I mean, I could be wrong, but I mean, you guys chime in. What do you think?
Point taken. I've seen men get arrested and started to cry. Children get arrested and started to cry. So you do a point. It could be an emotion of happiness and an emotion of sadness.
Like crying, like anything else, is therapeutic. Why? Because it releases, it gives you an opportunity to release certain endorphins that's meant to be released for that particular time to solve that particular emotion. But at the same time, I think most men were very conditioned, and it's not just black men. I think there's white men and every other kind of man. I think we're just conditioned not to cry, or not so much not to cry, but to cry with a purpose. And if we don't deem that situation necessary enough to cry, then we won't. You understand? Because we're going to be the foundation of that situation, whatever the situation is. If anybody left to hold that situation together or that circumstance together, then it's going to be us. We're the last, what you want to say? I want to say last, we're supposed to be the first line of defense, but at the same time, when it comes to that crying, we become the last line of defense to say, okay, while everybody's crying, somebody got to keep it together. So it comes off like almost a natural instinct to be that protective, and it becomes a protective factor as well. You understand? And so you got to understand how the psychology plays into that, because the psychology plays into your, for the lack of a better word, your anatomy, you understand, to be a protector. And so it's just instinctive of you not to cry, because you say, you know what, I got to keep things together to keep my family together in this circumstance that may be falling apart. Now, men a lot, and they always say that men are dogs, but I can tell you this, we have a lot of characteristics of dogs, because just like a dog would go and go alone to die by himself, he found a place to when he decides he wants to die, and he decides when he wants to die. So he'll go find that particular place and go ahead and die on his own. So that's a lot like men. We define what place and what time, date, and place we're going to cry. And so we have that control, you know, understand? We don't want to lose control of that. And a lot like that dog, you understand? We function in the instinct of that, okay, like, yeah, I'm going to cry. But we pick our places, our times, and when we're going to do so.
This is true. I remember in court when I did my final disposition to the judge, and I knew the judge was going to make a decision. And, you know, just to see at that point where I work so hard to keep a family, and the family is going to be separate. It's going to go into a different phase, maybe a broken family. And while talking to the judge, I was crying, and to be brought into that position and to cry for my children, it was a very tough thing for me to do. But as I say, emotions, I couldn't keep it down no more. I felt like I have a gavel at my neck, and it's either now or never.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Situation like that. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lawrence.
Oh, real quick. Yeah, I know. I think that crying for men is like you said earlier, Lionel, it's our last line of defense. Now, in other words, if I go past this crying, I'm going to do something that is totally out of my character. Now I'm getting ready to get violent or whatever the case may be. So I'm showing you that this is the line. I'm drawing a line in the sand. Now, after this, anything that goes beyond this, I'm not even going to be responsible for, because I'm just going to basically lose it. Go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just to what Ron was saying, you know, dude, you're in front of a judge and your family circle is being broken. I think that's a excellent, if you will, excuse to display some emotion, because that's a very deep and heavy thing. I guess when I think about crying, for me it's always been in a relationship scenario, and I would say that I'm still growing up in a certain way, in that there are certain things that I refuse to cry about in a relationship. Um, Outside of uh, extenuating circumstances, um, I think it depends on the situation. But when I look at Ron's cartoon, why can't you? What does it say? Why can't you show a tiny bit of emotion? I don't know, man. That's yeah, that may be just a cultural thing, because there's certain situations where I feel like in a relationship I just don't want to show any type of vulnerability, and like I said, I'm still growing on that one. So
And
I like to say, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
go ahead, Johnny, because you ain't seeing it. So go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to say that the aspect of like today in today's world, men showing or children crying or men crying, it's more accepted. It's more acceptable. I think today you see it on television more often. I watched that show, This Is Us, and the brother on there, Sterling, I can't remember his last name, but he like Denzel cousin to me. Like they could cry in an instant. Like something happened and they tears start falling out their face, and which is a great acting tool, like G mentioned. But I just think today being able to cry for men, especially in relationships, tends to be something that some women want to see. They may not want to see you crying all the time, if that makes sense what I'm saying, but they at times they do want to see you be show some sense of emotion at times. And I think in today's world that we're living in with social media and the whole, pronouns thing and all of the different things that have changed in this world, one of the things that's more acceptable is men being able to
Sound like Megatron. That's the
he's
Megatron.
breaking up.
That's Megatron. Autobots, we need to unite because Megatron trying to break into our thing. But I think what Johnny, I mean,
I'm sorry, y'all.
Just to, I think, follow up what Johnny was saying is, we live in a new, brave new world today, as I like to call it the brave new world, where everything can go and everything can happen, and what was wrong at one point is okay to do today, and what was okay to do is now wrong, kind of topsy-turvy, mixed up. And I think it has some pluses, but I also feel like it has some minuses, because it's not sometimes explained on why and how these things are being done. People are just kind of saying, hey, this is what I want to do, and because this is who I am, and this is what happens. And when, a lot of times we had, you couldn't just say, hey, and this is going to be, go back. I don't want to go to college. And you would have to explain to the parents why you don't, and they would, kind of give you some ultimatums. Okay, you don't go to college, you don't go to the military. Are you gonna go straight to work for us at the business, or go to the water plant and start working? So you had some, you couldn't just say, oh, I just want to figure out what I want. No, we're gonna make sure you do certain things. And in many instances that does change, how we kind of operate. Because if you show the kid that today, they might start crying, and say, I don't want to. I want to be able to figure out who and what I want to do. Where and I think that we have that advancement, but I think at some point we are the teachers of our children, not the society. The society is for them to practice what we teach. So we gotta be mindful as fathers that we are the ones who have to teach our kids what they can maneuver in the society. And if we don't do that, then, basically, what will they do? So this emotionality that we show, how we show emotionality, how we show why we show emotionality when we don't show. And Tony Porter is the guy's name. It came back to me. Tony Porter, example of the man box and how we design and clear and share with our children, both our boy children and our girl children, how the man box operates for us as the father, because that helps the son know how he should be and what he should do next. And it helps the daughter understand the emotionality of the man that she might get involved with and what she should respect and how respect and all those things work emotionally. Because she might say, well, my dad was an emotional guy and I can understand how you could be emotional. And let me try to figure those things out. So what do we think about that? That Tony Porter's man box, how do we, incorporate that into our, how have you, let me ask you, how have you, if you have at all, incorporated it into the rearing of your children at this point of your life?
Well, I know there's certain things, the more things change, the more they remain the same. So I wouldn't care what they're doing today. You don't get to dictate my emotions. You understand? You don't get to dictate how I display my emotions. Now, I'm all for the evolution of different things like that. But again, if I process things in a certain particular way, I have the right as a man and a human being to do so. So if I decide I want to cry in reverse, you understand? And I want to internalize my tears, then so be it. Because I'm going to understand the climate and the landscape of why I'm crying or when to cry, because you got to understand this too. And this is why it's very strategic. Because people can want you to do something all you want to look normal is all you want to. And that thing can be turned on you so much like a weapon. And I've seen people, and just like I kind of really got to give credence to Ron, because as much as that man cried, it didn't help his situation. You understand? And so for somebody to take my tears for granted, and that's one thing you can't do is take my tears for granted. This is why men are very strategic of who, what, when, where, and how they cry. So I'm saying to myself, man, listen, whatever keeps you strong, and particularly as a Black man, you understand, then you do that thing. Because at the end of the day, emotions is like the waves, like the sea, it shifts. And so everybody go to and fro on whatever new thing is going on. At the end of the day, you still gonna have to remain the same, because guess what? You're gonna still be seen the same as a Black man until things change. So things haven't changed that much. You understand? And you better have to be very necessary. You understand, when it comes to investing your tears on who, what, when, where, and why, and make sure they're worth crying over. Because if not, they'll make you kill them after they laugh in your face at your tears.
Yeah.
I think it was said earlier, and it's about this, and part of it is just the strategicness that Lightborn is talking about. It's about crying with a purpose. Women cry on a dime about anything, right? And sometimes we what do you call them? Crocodile tears. And so what happens is, as a man, like Lionel's saying, we have to cry with a purpose. There has to be some reason behind it. It can't be. Imagine walking into the room and a man's crying and you're like, yo, why are you crying? Because I can't find a pencil sharpener. How are you gonna you're gonna look at him a certain way? Let's be realistic. You see what I'm saying? Because you're gonna be like, yo, okay, that's not that grave that you need to cry. But that same man crying and you're like, what are you crying about? My mom just died, my dad just died, or something else like that. We'll feel the empathy for that person. So I think the purpose behind why you cry. Whereas, and I'm going to say this again, whereas a woman who's crying and you ask them why they're crying and they can give you the craziest reason, you're still going to be like, it's going to be okay. It's all right. Where we won't lend that same sympathetic or empathetic ear to a man crying over what we deem as frivolous. You know what I'm saying? And so there is a strategy and a strategicness to the crying. And there is and I'm not going to say, and it's not a shame to it. What it is a a worthiness. Like Bowen was saying, it's a worthiness of you to be able to see my tears. Are you worthy of seeing my tears? And am I going to allow you to see me in this state? Now, when it comes to, the relationship, and I want to revert to the cartoon that you had, I think the issue with that is sometimes we over stress the fact that men don't cry, men don't do this. So then it's internalized by our kids as not showing any emotion to anyone, regardless if it's a good one or a bad one. And so what we have to do is teach and educate them on when it is that you want to show vulnerability. How do you show vulnerability? And how do you do it in a way where you're not losing or feeling like you're losing the respect of those around you?
I'm on board. I'm
sorry.
board.
Go ahead, Ron.
Yeah. I'm on board with about the cartoon. If you look at the cartoon closely, where's the father? There's no father there. And if you think about it, the mom is teaching the son, who brain is growing. His brain has not fully matured, and she's pouring in into the bottle all the values that she has regarding crime. And here we look, years later, he's with another female. See, the scenarios have changed now. It's not a mother versus a son. It is maybe a husband versus a wife. Again, no father. So if you look at the cartoon, you could see history and present, and who knows what the future holds.
But that's the thing about crying, because you got to understand this is a very tricky discussion, and then you have to start considering the motives of all parties involved who want to put this stigma, I'm going to call it stigma, of men not crying. First of all, we have to understand this. Crying for two reasons, and most people, and I'm not gonna blanket the whole gender, but I will say this: women can use crying for two reasons, versus a man only using it for one. Women can use crying as an emancipation or manipulation. You understand? Men are not conditioned that way, and so crying for us is more of an emancipation more than a manipulation. It's very seldom you see a man crying for manipulation reasons. But for a woman, she can cry either or. For an emancipation, that means she's just trying to deliver herself from that situation, or she can cry for manipulation reasons because she just want to have her way. You understand? And so we got to be very careful that if we're not really willing to play by those rules, don't be so quick, you understand, to let tears run down your face just for somebody to laugh in your face.
Mm. And that really goes back into the ability of learning that in the childhood. The early development of how these things are established in our children's early development of how power and control works for them. The son go to the daddy crying and say, daddy, my ice cream. That's why you ain't gonna get no more ice cream. The daughter goes, daddy, my ice cream. Oh, let daddy get you another ice cream, baby. Come on, let me get you another ice cream. So you know that there is some gender role things that happen in relation to this crime that we sometimes kind of like, maybe we acknowledge, and sometimes we don't acknowledge. I know a lot of times we don't acknowledge things. We pretend like they just happen. They didn't have no motive behind it. They just kind of happened. And another great aspect of this to talk about is when we're looking at grieving and loss, because that part is completely out of this. And I think that there is an importance of it. And going back to the Tony Porter example I gave of his father looking as he never grieved the loss of the son until the moment that he did so with Tony in the car, that he felt comfortable, as Lightboy said, he felt comfortable to be able to do. Because there is some stigma that comes with this idea of you dropping them salt drops out your eye. It ain't seen as like, oh yeah, no, it is very difficult to sometimes even recover from it. As a young person, if somebody if they got you the crybaby, they're gonna always be calling you the crybaby. You might be following that crybaby bullying type mentality for your rest of the time you might be in that environment or school relations with those people. So we have to really think about how to really describe people being able to understand their emotions and being able to express their emotions in ways that they can be able, because if you ever met, I know I ask my daughter this all the time, what you crying for? I ask my nephew, even when I know why he crying, what you crying for? Because I want them to think about what is the reason why they're actually crying. What is bringing that emotion, that tear out? Is it that I'm giving this wood to you and then you kind of, you feeling like, oh, I can't take no more? Or is it that you're trying to trick me out? Because I know my nephew tried to trick me out sometimes. He's doing all the crying. No, I don't, that has no effect on me. Because you wasn't crying when you was doing this act over here and what thing this other little thing you doing that didn't give me that you wasn't crying then, bro. You was styling and profiling, smiling, doing a Hulk Hogan dance out here. But now you that don't work. It don't work for my daughter either, because I had both of them together one time. We had the classic and they cutting up. I told them, hey, that don't work for me. So it's also being able to show some equality between the two of them, that their crying didn't work and they need to cry for what was appropriately a reason to cry, to get out of that that's the part I really want more than anything. Get out of that manipulating crying, because it doesn't serve you sometimes. It will only put you backwards.
Well, I'm gonna say it's I think in a sense with one of the examples that you gave, and even with the cartoon, I want to go back to what Rohan said, because you could replace that mom with a dad and that message will still be the same. And it's going to translate later on to the next relationship, because when we have our sons and they fall and they skin their knee and they start crying, as dads, you say, come on, get up, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, right? Whereas a mom will be more reluctant to be like, oh, baby, come here, and give them a hug and coddle them, right? But we as dads be like, no, don't cry, get up, get up, keep playing. And we're telling you to push through it, keep going. Bottle that emotion up, right? And we don't realize how it translates to other pieces of your life. And so when we continue to tell you to bottle some emotion up, you start to bottle emotion up in different compartmentalized pieces, and it starts to manifest in different ways later on. Whereas when we ask you, why aren't you saying anything? You're like, I don't got nothing to say, because you don't feel you can be vulnerable. I don't think that is just the deliverance of a mom to a child. I think it's deliverance of a parent to a child. And we teach our daughters to manipulate, just like Ron was saying, because when they skin their knee, or when they drop ice cream, or when something bad happens to them and they start crying, we don't tell them what, we really don't say what you're crying for. We tell them, oh, it's gonna be okay, come here. And they get the affection that's and in that affection, it's rewarding their crying. And so now they see, oh man, if I cry, I can get stuff. If I cry, I can get out of stuff. How many women, because think about it, how many women do we know that they're like, yeah, man, I got pulled over for a speeding ticket and I started to cry and the cop let me off. You see what I'm saying? Whereas if you were a man, you got pulled over for a speeding ticket, you start crying, the guy's gonna be like, come on now, stop it. You got, so we're teaching that. And so we have to be conscious of what it is that we're teaching when we do that. And I think, like I was saying earlier, it has to be a level of, when our son does cry, don't stop him from crying because he hurt himself, because it's painful, but work with him on how to mend the pain. You see what I'm saying? It's okay to cry. All right, cry it out. Because sometimes that's what you need to do when you hurt yourself. That like it was said earlier, that crying is cathartic. It's actually one of the ways that we release pain is to cry it out. And once you cry it out, you feel better.
So it sounds like what I'm hearing from you gentlemen is that maybe something that I may have missed out on as my children were growing up is to consciously teach how to focus your tears in, I guess, a more constructive reason. Because I guess I never thought about asking, why are you crying? Even if I know why they're crying, but to ask it anyway so that they can express in their own words why they are crying. And that in and of itself, I think, is a teaching tool because it gives them the ability to communicate what it is that they're feeling at that moment. Even though I may assume that I know what it is, either I just whooped your butt, or you did fall and hurt your knee, but maybe there's something else intertwined in that they may be releasing at the same time, that if I don't ask, I don't know. And if they don't know how to communicate it, maybe when they're adults, that's one of the things that's difficult for maybe a man to do in front of his woman, is to express, hey, I'm crying because of this, as opposed to just crying.
Hey,
But,
hey,
you know, do you think
hey,
though, as a man,
like,
as men, do we really want to take that chance? And what I mean by that,
Yeah.
physiologically
I know what you mean.
and physiologically, it's acceptable for a woman to cry. And what I mean by that, how many times have we heard they say, oh, she's crying. Oh, you know what? She's on her cycle. So, you know, that's just part of how it goes. So, and we take that, and when I think about it, at such a time when that is happening, you are also developing as a young man. So the last thing that you want to do at that point is to say, guess what? If I start crying, then I'm reducing or acting just like that lady does while she's having her cycle. So does that put me in the same category? You know, and I think as when you're growing up, that's the thing that you want to stay as far away from as you can, because then someone says, oh, you acting just like a female. Look at you acting like a female, you
and
know, and that's
Larry,
tough.
Larry, I love that you're saying, and I love you and Ed are bringing in some real generational type of things that have occurred to us. Even when we look at, and I'm sure that and you can probably even speak. I know you can probably speak to this, having two separate generations of kids, and the kids, your earlier kids, and I know this. I know this, especially from and I talk about this article all the time. I've seen an NPR about a father who said that, you know, what I did with my older kids, the kids I'm kind of raising today is completely different. And it was blowing his mind, the idea of that he was able to even feel like he was even more closer, or even did some of the things that we're describing, being able to ask the child what's going on, having more communication and emotional regulation with them compared to with the older kids. Now, that doesn't mean the older kids didn't get what they, you know, didn't get what they got, but the time was different. The time was that was the standard. You get, I don't care why you crying. Get your ass out. I mean, get your behind out of here. Get in the bathtub or something like that. Whereas now you say, hey, why are you crying? And the child might say, because I feel so bad that I made you upset with me. Yo, that's some new wave stuff that we had never even processed. Till now we realize that our kids might be even more emotional than our older kids was, because they're learning in a society that's over emotional. And then now I will throw this in there, throw this other part in there. It's important to show the equality and balance of emotionality between men and women, for how people can understand what their emotionality, our children, our boys and girls understand what their emotionality is. And I really feel that way. I know people may get pushback, whatever. But I think that if a boy grows up, and I think that, I think this a lot, boy grows up, and I talk about where my emotionality comes from. It comes from growing up in the house with my mother, my sister, my grandma, my auntie, in that house, just us. But the balance of that emotionality I got when I went to my daddy and his rough town brothers and uncles who take you out on the street, who take you down on the block and do unsavory things while you standing there with them, and you just a part of it. So you begin to get this balance of emotionality and what it means, and from people who love you. And I think that's another big part of it, because if you're getting that emotionality from people who don't love you, it's not going to be real, and you're going to take on something that's not a part of who you are. So I think that we really need to, as fathers, recognize that, hey, if the mother's raising the kid by herself and giving all the emotionality from her, you're doing your kid a disservice emotionally, because he or she needs to get some of that emotionality from you as much as possible, and need to understand how they can regulate it in themselves. And we sometimes just take it for granted. We just take that whole thing for granted, and we leave it all on the moms to provide all the emotionality. And again, now we just said a minute ago that they're highly emotional. What you think the kids is now? Highly emotional.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
His emotion has no regulation tool, so he'll go out there and say, "You stepped on my shoe, bang, bang, bang," because I don't have any way to regulate my emotions. I'm upset, and you upset me so much that I don't know how to say, well, it is what it is. I just get the stuff out. We have to think about it.
Ron, I'm glad you brought that up just now. And we look at the society today where there's anger, there is strife, there is a lot of people who don't know how to control their emotions. And I'm not saying they should cry at every event or cry with a purpose, but many people are crying. Many people are crying as we speak, and it's using anger as a means of communicating. So this crying goes way beyond just crying. It can manifest in so many different ways.
I think that it's also, and I know we're focused on crying, but it's a matter of the expressive piece, right? Are we teaching our kids to be expressive with their language so that the crying is purposeful, right? Because if I'm not teaching you how to express yourself and teaching you a language, like with the great example that Ron gave, with asking, why are you crying? He says, because I'm upset. I'm bothered I made you upset. No, that's a big piece of expressive language that they just displayed. And to be able to articulate your emotions is something that we also should be teaching, not just the physical expression of the emotion, but the articulation of how you're feeling. Because a lot of times, if I can tell you how I feel, you don't necessarily need to see how I feel. If I can express it and I don't have to express it physically and still feel satisfied that you understand what I'm saying, then that goes a long way. It diffuses a lot of situations, and escalation doesn't have to happen, because now that I like Larry was saying, you got me tears coming out my eyes to the point where the next step is an act of violence because you're just not getting it. You see what I'm saying? So what it is that we have to teach the expressive words, expressive language, and pair it with the emotions so that they can articulate how they feel. They can express how they feel. And so when the crying comes about, for them, I guess it's, for lack of a better word, it's a justified cry. And it's not an emotional cry that'll lead to something else.
I heard my wife and I were watching this old movie last night. I heard one of the most profound things, which is perfect for this particular discussion. The guy said, I think he said, St. Augustine said, he said, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. And so with that, and I thought it was one of the most, I said, wow, I said, I wish that was mine, but it wasn't mine. but I thought it was one of the most profound things, which brought me back to the class I used to teach called tear therapy, shed tears and not blood. Now, I think we need to be very tactical in how we teach and train our young men what it is to cry, because they can understand that when you cry, nobody dies. And so when they understand the trade-off and the empowerment of options that go along with that, I can still teach them that and not emasculate them at the same time. And so a man want to know how to learn how to cry without being emasculated. And most of the time, society, they want to emasculate you with their strategy of crying. Oh, you should just cry. I'm like, no, men have to be taught to cry. And there's a certain way and strategy of teaching men how to cry. Because again, at the end of the day, let me be clear, because I don't want people to just be denying me my experience as a black man, or denying us our experience of black men. I said, how many black men were you seeing choke to death that was crying on that ground? Did it make them let them go? Did it make them show mercy? Or did they continue to choke them to death? And so when you ask me, why am I crying or why we don't cry? And I'm saying, you seeing the man on the ground crying and he still died. As a matter of fact, it was saw so much as a weakness, it made them want to choke his neck even more. So the next time you ask me that, you understand, we have to be very purposeful in who we are. And I'm not going to deny myself for you. You understand? So if it's going to be a trade-off, it better be a damn good one. But at the end of the day, I think we again, as men, we shouldn't, you understand, being the visionaries and being the purpose-driven people that we are, we shouldn't, you understand, be shook or rattled by anything that's not deemed worthy of our tears or even who we are or even our attention. You hear it preached every day in church when it comes to building women, but who's actually building men? Who wants to build a man and letting know who really want to build a black man? So we got a lot to talk about.
A lot to talk about.
You can give it. Listen, we're gonna take the ties now.
Listen, man.
Let me just say that. Hold on 1 minute, Johnny. Let me just say this. We ain't gonna take the ties, but we are gonna say, if you're watching, folks, please like and share and subscribe. Go up in the corner, hit the little bell, so you can hear some more of that preaching that Bishop Reverend Dr. Lightboy is gonna give us.
Amen.
Because listen, I don't know if you heard what he just said, but it was you might have been listening like I was listening, but it was powerful, and it's going to bring me to when we after Johnny or whoever else, I'm going to take us to the place where we really start to talk about this, about being men and crying and how it compares. Go ahead, Johnny. I'm sorry.
Well, first of all, I was just going to say, Bishop Dr. Reverend, good point. And as usual, you do it with such forcefulness and articulation that you will definitely help us with our emasculation, or I'm just clowning. Listen, the thing about crying that I have learned now, being where I am in my life, is that it does allow you to get rid of some anger and issues that come when they do. So I do understand that. And I do agree with Lightburn and being strategic, and everybody, what they said, being strategic in crying. My thing is, how do we get those young men who aren't having us as guides and mentors around them to understand the same thing? Because most of us here are, have lived a pretty decent amount of years in our lives, okay? So we've gone through some things, made some mistakes, done some things, and we're now at a point in our lives where the choices that we're making is very strategic in how we go about making choices and what we do. So we have a better understanding. But us learning this and knowing this and sharing with each other is great, because some of us, as I don't know, Brother 10E, I'm sure the fact that you even said today that you learned something about how you were raising your children tells me this is a great, great platform. I just want it to be for the younger brothers so they don't make the mistakes that we might have made when we were younger, with not understanding that we can cry. It's just when and how we go about crying. if that makes any sense what I'm saying, gentlemen. Because a lot of us, especially in our community, don't even believe that there's something we can do. And we get so much built up anger and animosity that the only way we end up letting it out is by shedding blood and not by shedding tears. So I just want us to continue to be able to reach younger guys with this same topic that we're doing. But this is an awesome topic. I wish I was sitting at my desk, Ron. I'd have been more hunkered down with all my legal stuff, but it's all good. We gonna do this how I'm doing it today.
Hey, we know we gotta move, man. I'm just glad that you're here today. So let me take us into the line, because I know this. I'm gonna take us into this slide where we're about to go in and listen. It's gonna take us into some real serious conversation about this emotionality, about big boys don't cry, and where this kind of might even play itself out. Let's first deal with the man issue about crying for all men, because what we realize is that women embrace each other when they cry. There's not a thing where they look at it, oh, that chick crying, what's wrong with her? But for men, we don't embrace that. And not only that we don't embrace another man crying, we begin to utilize that to challenge his masculinity. And then even in that can influence our women that this man is crying. I'm a man who don't cry. He's not masculine. And now we're looking at the whole idea of being able to be emotional, to be able to cry, to be able to do those things is now being challenged by another man who may want to cry, but is living in a bubble that so I got to show that I got to be the masculine man, macho man, and not cry. Whereas that might be good for you, a man who doesn't have any legacy. But for us men who have legacy as fathers, it doesn't serve us well at all. It doesn't serve our generations well for us not to, go into that spectrum of our emotions in that way and realize that another man doesn't determine if I'm a man. I determine if I'm a man. My child determines if I'm a man. My woman determines if I'm a man to them. Because really sometimes only thing that matters is what they really perceive. You call this dude tell you, he telling you what kind of man you are, but you call him and say, hey man, I need help. Guess what? I'm with my woman. I'm out with the boys at the game. I can't help you. Your child will say, where my daddy at? Let me go and help my daddy. Your woman will say, she'll go, what you want me to do? Go sell my wedding ring? Want me to go sell this so I can get you out of this situation? So we have to reevaluate as men who determines the importance of our emotionality and why is it important and who is it important to. Because I feel that this whole crying and the stigma of crying comes from men on other men. So it's like a man on man thing. But if we as fathers take the initiative to say, there's a reason we gotta cry, because we need to show people that we have a certain types of emotions so they can also move on past us and not be stuck in that cycle of I'm stronger than you, I'm bigger than you, I don't have any emotions. Because not having emotions doesn't allow you to have relationships because you can't relate. If women are highly emotional, if you have no emotions, you're never gonna connect with them. Now I ain't saying women are emotional, but I'm just saying you can't put a square in a circle. You put an octagon, you squeeze an octagon, maybe a small, that you can't put that square in that circle.
Very good point. Very good point, Ron. Emotions and relationship. Yeah, it's a very good point.
What happens is, I think with men, right? The reason why men don't embrace other men is because it's an awkwardness that you see, because you're like, I don't know how to deal with when I cry. So how am I going to deal with someone else when they cry? Because I don't know how to handle my own emotions. There's no way you can then show someone or go up to somebody and help them manage those emotions, especially when it's another man on the other end. So I think it starts from there. Knowing how to handle your own emotions, therefore you can then understand how to handle another man's emotions when they're displaying it. So I think it starts off with the awkwardness of man, I don't know how to comfort you in a sense. And so from there, it turns from I don't know how to comfort you to I might as well make light of the situation. And so that's when I start teasing you about it. Because I just need that emotion to go away.
Mm-hmm.
I think Ron said something. Actually, you know what? I know Ron said something really profound. The only way any man can prove that he is a man is the fact that his woman, his children, or his significant other come to his aid when they know he's hurting. And just to pull a few points of reference, there was a play back in the day called Men Cry in the Dark. There's also a song that Lyfe Jennings wrote called Cry. And I reference that song personally because in a part of a song, it says, crying is like taking your soul to a laundromat. The type of feeling you get when your grandmama smile or the heavens open up and bless his way down. Your soul is crying. It's like we all been saying this whole entire time. It's an overabundance of emotion, but not knowing when to do it or feeling that it's a sign of weakness. And even feeling that it's a sign of strength. It's a mixed emotion in our community in so many aspects because we get it from so many different levels. As I stated before in many videos ago, that I had to learn from different aspects of looking outside of my life that was going on in the house because I didn't have the perfect balance as we're speaking about tonight. Because my father, my actual birth father, he didn't cry. I've never witnessed him cry unless it was something that really, really hurt him, but it wasn't the things that we deem as something that a man should get emotional. McCall, my father showed me there was a sign of strength because when you exude an emotion in front of people that you love, they know how you feel. They're familiar with the person that's in front of them, and they know they love that person. They want to understand why you're going through the situation that you're going through. Most family members will try to help you out if these people around you will try to help you get through your emotions. So, with all that being said, it's many great points that we made tonight, and we touched on so many great bases. I just hope and I pray that people connect to different ones and actually find out exactly where they need to be so they can be and know that they're a man.
Lawrence? Okay, all right, cool. That's good. It's all right. Just make sure you're okay, man. I see you have your head down.
Yeah, you know the medical doctor. Yeah, the medical doctor here, man.
I was about to cry.
Somehow though, we have to figure out how to change the narrative of our culture and how the outside defines us. And I don't know what the answer is to that, but I think to your point, Ron, you said earlier that it's almost as if we don't give ourselves permission as a culture of men to have a space or a safe space if we wanted to cry with a group of men. You know, I'm not sure if it's going to happen. If I'm around a group of black brothers, and something is striking me emotionally, it's going to be something to get me to cry in front of those brothers, because I'm going to be concerned with how I'm going to be perceived after showing that emotion. So I don't know how we're going to get to a space. I don't have the answer to that. But Brother Robert spoke earlier about being able to communicate that emotion behind the cry. And that kind of resonated with me because at least when I saw my kids growing up, it just never dawned on me to help them communicate how they're feeling at that moment to me, and use that ability to verbally communicate what they're feeling as a means of an outlet to express what they're feeling, so we don't get to a spot where, like Ron was saying earlier, I ain't got no tears for this. Pow pow, you stepped on my shoe. So you guys are gonna have to redefine the narrative.
But we,
'Cause-
we're doing that right now, and the goal of that is we might not redefine it for ourselves. That's why it's important as the fathers we are and the grandfathers to redefine that for our children and our grandchildren, because if they can have the confidence, and this is where it really comes in, the confidence, and can have and find like souls who have the confidence to say, it's okay, my brother, if you want to cry about this, because real men do cry. Once we start getting into that, because I think that a lot of people, when we're caught into that narrative that you're talking about, Ed, it's people who are emotionally suffered. They don't know how to do these things, and because they don't know how to do them, as Robert said, they don't want you to do them because you're gonna make them feel uncomfortable about what they can't do. We have to make it the norm that it is okay and comfortable, and that our women say, I understand why my man is crying. He lives a very hard life in this world.
So I hear you saying that as we raise our children, our grandchildren, that we can then begin to redefine the narrative of our culture by us taking the leadership of teaching them.
Teaching, talking, and having those conversations, because again, asking that, listen, this question that I asked these two kids that I be dealing with, what you crying? Why are you crying? And then that leads us to have a conversation. When you tell me when I'm crying, I said, wait, let me tell you what you might want to cry about. Cry about if your mom, while you're in here watching this pornography on her phone, right? That the state, because she's involved with something, her business, her job, and the people check her phone, and then she lose her job, and then you lose your stable ability to live. Don't cry. That's what you need to be thinking about crying about, because you're all going to be hurt. So cry about how you might be hurting your mom, not thinking about your pleasure. And then see, that's me being facetious with him, but we able to really break down and have that conversation where is it appropriate to cry and why is it not appropriate to cry? Oh, somebody picked on me, so I lost my temper and I threw a book at him. Listen, why does it matter what they said to you? You got everything you want in the world, dear brother. I love you. Your mom love you. Your grandma love you. People love you. But we got to spend that. I think that's where, as fathers, we have to take the lead in sharing and leading that to our children. And a lot of times what kind of happens, we get so caught in the hustle and bustle, we just let the children be raised by the road.
Ron, I like how you say that. And I say this to fathers, just to add to what Ron said. I always talk about signs. We guys who drive on the road, we see the 45 miles per hour, 35 miles per hour. The signs are always there. Sometimes it may not be physical tears, but look for the signs amongst our young men, amongst our young women, the signs of hurt and anger, and have an open conversation. Let's just talk. Let's talk 2 minutes. What's going on? Let's open up the platform to have these kind of discussions. You will see the signs of hurt.
And let's talk about tips. You have to be persistent. You can't say, okay, whatever, you don't want to tell me. You got to be persistent. You got to continue, and then you got to bring it up when they're not even upset. See, because if somebody upset, man, I want to talk. You got to wait till you all get that ice cream at the ice cream parlor and say, you know what, I want to come back to you about something. Because they feeling good. They licking and that is good. Let me ask you something. You were upset the other day. What was you upset about? And you'll find that there'll be a lot more open in this happier moment when the sweetness is in them and their belly getting tangled by the sugar to tell you, well, I was upset because of this and because of that. And then you can have a dialogue and a conversation with them, and then be able to bring that conversation, hopefully, as I say, and I advocate for people, at your dinner table when y'all all sit down and have some type of meal or something together. I know I'm asking for a lot now by suggesting that we get all together and have, but this communication within the family, when we're talking about being able to express these things that happen, it comes with making some stand. I think somebody was saying recently, we got to really make some new standards, some new standards for how, and when I say make new standards, I don't mean someone come up with standards. You know your family and what's standards for y'all in your house. You got to make those standards for you and what works for the people that's in the house with you, because you got maybe got 2 individuals, maybe got 3, maybe got 4, and you got to know each of the people and know how y'all gonna bring that together at a table. And it's amazing that we know how to do that at our workplace, but we act like we can't do it at our home.
Ron, to add to that, that's a very valid point. I in my marriage, I tried to have a meeting, well, if that's the right word, where we could sit and talk about issues. Everyone had the opportunity to talk. And surprisingly, that could never happen because of power and control. I know as a divorcee, I'm having a meeting every Friday. So look at that scenario. In the marriage, I couldn't do it because then you were told you're trying to get power and control. And here I am in a two home setting where we're having a sitting down, having a meeting about our children. So the reason I put that in is sometimes things happen for a reason. And sometimes you don't give up on the goal, because even we're 2 households, you can still have that meeting and still to have an open meeting about issues that are affecting our children and affecting us. And I think it's a wonderful idea to have that dialogue, because it shows the children that you care. It's not just give them something to eat and go to your room. You know, I like that, Ron. I must say.
You know, another thing we fail to do, I think, because we particularly don't or not used to creating our own curriculum as Black people. We always used to people feeding us our curriculums and our solutions and other crap like that. So, and we fail to teach from our own examples. What does that mean? That means as an adult, as a man, right? It is mandatory that I use my examples, right, to mentor my children's experiences. Case in point, my oldest daughter, I knew at one point that she would, and just like anybody else would, experience heartbreak. So what I did was I tend to be what they call, and this again, you can use this as well. You have to be emotionally proactive. Now, how do you do that? You have to share your experiences, your vulnerable experience. Remember, you get to choose that. So I get to choose my vulnerable experiences where I had experiences when I did cry. And I showed them that strategy on, okay, this is what I did. I said, okay, I went and I rented me a hotel room, right? And I buried my head in the pillows until I got all the tears out for your mom. Now, what's the science behind that? I said, because all those tears, every drop, represent every moment, every minute, and every day you spend with that person to get them out of your system. Now, it may not take one day. It may take a whole weekend. For me, it took a weekend. You understand? But I knew, as much as my friends can try to get me out the house and try to cheer me up, it was inevitable that I had to get that cry out in order to start my healing and recovery process. And so when you make sense out of the crying, as opposed to just having a generic version of emotion and what we see on TV, you understand? And I'm like, if you don't understand your own experiences and how you got through your own hurt and use that as a teaching tool for your children, then shame on you, because you was equipped with the very curriculum you need, you understand, to get your children to where they need to be and pass any hurt. And so that's what I'm saying. Don't deprive your experiences from your being an example or your past example for mentoring your children's present experiences.
You know,
great.
Speaking of what like Ron was saying, I think that what happens is you got a lot of parents out there that that don't want to admit that they went through stuff, that don't want to admit whether the positive or the negative that they've gone through in life. And until you start to do that, like Ron was saying, and use that as a teaching tool, one, it allows your kids to get to know you, and it will allow your kids to respect you more. A lot of people don't realize that your kids will respect you more because they understand and they hear where you went through and where you're coming from with it. And it will also help them to deter deter them from going forward with anything that, whether you're giving them a life story about something that negative that happened to you, positive that happened to you, it will help shape the way they think about the situation. And so it's very powerful that you do share your life experiences with them in order for them to see, hey, I'm no different from you when I was your age. All that happened is I'm just a little bit older. You're going through the same crap. It's a circle. And until you can tell your kids that by sharing your experiences, not just telling them, but sharing your experiences and sharing the things that made you who you are, so they can get a better understanding, then you're just wasting your time. Because you can't be the perfect pitcher. You can either be the poison or you can be the antidote. And so aim yourself to be the antidote, because that's what's going to help them move forward and be a better person, and allow them, like Ron was saying, to get that well-roundedness of emotions when it comes to being able to regulate yourself.
Mm-hmm. And I 100% agree with you. And I think the reason why we've historically had a problem with that is because we've learned from others how to be men. And they went through what they went through. So just imagine Larry's father and Ed's father and what they experienced growing up in America as Black men in the South during those times, or during that period. Being a Black man during that time didn't allow for you to be able to cry, because life was already difficult enough as it was. So you now shedding tears on top of stuff that we all got to go through isn't something that we trying to see. So you now have to take Larry and Ed, who have seen this because of where they came from, and now you're asking them to teach their children, their sons, how to be different from what they saw, which is going to be hard. So I understand why we historically have had the issue. And like I said at the very beginning, we've historically had this situation where we grew up as men, and Black men particularly in this country, where shedding tears wasn't what we did, because you had to get through it anyway. You got to deal with it anyway. So, and if that was the case, you'd be crying all the time. So I think today, however, we live in a different society that allows us to be able to teach our children differently, so that we don't have to necessarily have to go through it on our own. Where I understand Ed and Larry's generation having really not the direction to be able to share with their children. But I think we're in a different point now. We're learning both from what they did and what they didn't do, and how to be better fathers to our children and our family. At least that's how I've been. Because like I told my kids all the time, I learned a lot from my daddy. I learned what not to do, a whole lot of what not to do. But I also learned a lot of what to do. And, because he wasn't no crying type either. I remember the first time I hugged my dad, I might have been 20-something years old. And when I hugged the man, it was as if he was scared. He was like, "What is this?" He stood, without shaking. Like he couldn't even respond. And I said, "I love you." Nothing. It was like crickets from the man. But the more and more, because again, he didn't have that experience. Right. So it's hard for him to understand what is this boy doing? Man, we don't do this. He hugging me and talking about he loved me. We don't do this. So again, that's part of us changing narrative, because we are in a different time today, and we don't have to deal with what their generation had to deal with to the level they did. So I thank God for that change, because we could allow our children to just be children and teach them from our situations how to be better men and women.
Hey, Johnny, you just broke down the transgenerational love sign, because what happens is, and I think you gave a great example, that one generation, not that they didn't know how to love, it was the expression of it was something that they couldn't express because of the time. And then now you come in trying to express that to them, because you feel a little bit more empowered to do so. But your kids have no limits. They want to come kiss you in the mouth. They don't, they want to. And I just want to put that in context, because as the society has for us in some instances changed for a liberation, maybe we still stuck in oppression, but our kids in many cases, they completely, and if we've changed their dynamics, no matter, if we made something better for them, they're completely liberated then from us. And I think I've seen that over my time being in the school, thinking, why these kids don't do none of this stuff. Like, listen, y'all remember when in Miami the black people be beating up the Haitian kids, and they don't do that. That don't exist no more. That kind of stuff ain't, they don't, that's nothing. That stuff is foolishness now, because they have adjusted beyond that idea of, I don't like them because they somebody different. We have had some more inclusion, some diversity to occur, and that's exposure. And so there is some big differences that we do get to see, that we sometimes now get our kids, and I say this all the time, our kids teaching us, and then we going back and teaching our own fathers and our grandfathers some stuff that, and I won't say teaching, but exposing them to an opportunity to understand that this was okay and this can be okay to do. And I think that was a great point of that. Let's let that be the close there, that we learned that everything doesn't have to trickle down. Some things can trickle up. And I think that's a big part about fatherhood. I think about parenting, about transgenerational experiences, that everything that we might experience don't mean it's only for us. It's also within the family below us and the family above us. And that's how we can resolve our, look at how to really handle our emotions and deal with, do big boys cry, and can they cry, and is it okay? I think we determine that that's all fine and dandy, based on your family structure and how you design it. I think that, I believe in a lot of the states' mindset about stuff when it comes to the family. The family determines what they do and how they operate. Don't let other people determine. We've had enough of people determining what we do and how we do it long enough as a people for us not to determine for ourselves. So, gentlemen, this has been a fruitful conversation. I want to thank everybody for joining. Thank Ed. Good to see you again tonight, brother. I missed you a couple of, because I said when you came on the other night, hey, we need that kind of experience on the call. And just to remind you, Johnny, we do got the young guys. The young guys don't come on camera, but they down here listening. They down there picking up the jewels down there in the bottom of the bottom of the Zoom. They don't like to come on the camera, but they're there picking up the jewels. So we just gotta get. I think this is the point we say we want to get this as much as possible. Share this to share this to the woman that who come saying, my baby daddy, the guy, my husband. Share this with her. Share this with her, and trust me, she'll share it with him. And some guys just say, hey man, come and check us out. And I think we're gonna try to really work that out. Again, we want to welcome people, especially fathers. You look in the chat, you're looking in the comments. You can see how to join us tomorrow night for our fathers only private meeting that we have on Wednesday nights, Fatherhood Talks. And join us. We'll be continuing this conversation, but moving it more into our curriculum-based and more confidential type of conversation, a much more safer space. This is a safe space, but a much more confidential safer space. Because if you say something on here, it's going to the world right now. So you don't want to say, that's why, keep it like that. Again, thanks guys for coming. And do everybody want to repeat after me? I am a man of honor.
I am a man of honor.
I am a man of courage.
I am a man of courage.
I said I am a man of respect.
I am a man of respect.
I said that I am.
I am.
I said that you are.
You are.
I said that we are.
We are
Championship
championship
fathers.
fathers.
Right, that's right.
And I gotta always tell people, when you see us flexing like this, it's not because we macho men, it's because we got our children on our arms and we holding them up. And that's an important thing for people to see, because they'll take a screenshot. Oh, they macho men.
Hey.
What we are doing is we're holding our children up as we should do as fathers. Thank you.
Amen.
And we'll see you next week on Fatherhood Talks.
All right, my brothers, have a good night.
Peace, yeah. So a good one.
Have a blessed one.
Good, brother.
All right, y'all have a good
All
night.
right, good night.